My name is Jacob Larson, and this is the Common Sense Show. Over the last couple of weeks, we've been discussing whether or not science and religion is compatible. The last two shows have been pretty interesting. Last week, our guests were Pastor Ron and Corey. So if you didn't get a chance to listen to the last couple shows, make sure you go to the website, www.bycommonsense.com, and check them out. We have recordings of those shows listed there. Is science and religion compatible? Yes, most definitely yes. The problem lies in the willingness of people to actually take the time to study and consider the things that step outside of their worldview. Now, some people don't need a ton of information or details about how things started or how things operate in order for them to have faith or not believe. In fact, I'd say the vast majority of believers and non-believers couldn't think their way out of a paper bag when it comes to the subject. Most people are so stuck in what they think they know to be true that anything they see or read that falls contrary to their view, they simply dismiss. And that's a mistake. There are literally thousands of things that science cannot explain. There are frontiers completely left unexplored. For someone who advocates for science to simply dismiss them out of pure arrogance and stubbornness is foolishness. And for those who profess belief, there is simply more to the Bible and belief than just Bible stories. God created science, and the Bible is filled with biology, anthropology, geology, and every other ology you can imagine, should you actually take the time to study up on it. And yet churches all across the globe are teaching their kids the Bible stories and leaving out the science behind what they're teaching. And then they sit there and wonder why no one takes them seriously. The word ridiculous doesn't quite describe it. So is science and religion compatible? Of course. Quarks existed long before science ever discovered them as being smaller than the atom. The discovery of quantum mechanics has led to all sorts of interesting and fascinating concepts in quantum theory. Discoveries of alternate universes, maybe even time travel, are closer to becoming a known reality now, more so than they've been. And explanations of those discoveries will be mind-blowing. Things don't cease to exist simply because science hasn't discovered them yet. Things don't become any less real simply because you choose not to believe in them. The study of science was started with the early church. Now, no one is going to attempt to argue the premise behind why the early church began studying science, but the concept of people of faith wanting to explore and unlock the secrets of the universe isn't a new concept and is something you may want to consider. Believers are not ignorant and stupid people. I'm not saying that the vast majority of believers that sit side by side in the pew on Sunday morning when confronted wouldn't struggle to find a leg to stand on when it comes to defending their faith. I'd agree that the vast majority of them are only capable of repeating the mantra, the Bible is true because God said it's true and I believe him. Sure. But you should be careful in assuming that all believers have accepted that answer, because there are believers that have chosen to dig deeper. There are people who believe in Christ that have literally slayed dragons in their thought process, touched on things and explored things far deeper and to more detail than you've ever imagined. And for an unbeliever to sit there and simply dismiss what has been found simply out of arrogance is more than foolish. It's out stupid. And I mean that in the nicest way possible. Today we've got a special guest on the show, a woman by the name of Lisa King. Lisa was the lady that got me set up on this show, gave me all sorts of information and guidance when it came to how I conduct this show. Anyone has heard the first few shows, I'm sure they've been able to notice the difference. The first show I did was a total nightmare. I crashed and burned horribly. Lisa gave me some tips, and I believe I've gotten a bit better because of that. So I owe Lisa King a big thanks, and I'm stoked to have her on the show. We're going to be talking about how kids are being raised. So if you have any questions for Lisa, Theron, or myself, please feel free to call in at 541-284-7953. Once again, that number is 541-284-7953. Give us a call. Let us know what you think. Lisa, thank you very much for coming on the show.
You're very welcome.
I absolutely appreciate it.
I'm glad you're on the air, and thank you so much for inviting me. This is awesome.
You did it at the drop of a hat, which was awesome. I mean, last week I was totally not prepared for this at all, and I was scrambling to put stuff together, and I had a an idea for a show posed by a lady by the name of Chanda Mills. I went to high school with her years ago. I had thrown out a thing on Facebook saying, hey, I need some ideas for the show. And she threw up this idea about raising kids. Now, her approach was obviously the financial aspects behind what it takes to raising kids. And I kind of wanted to go a little bit farther, more detail with that. And we've had prior conversations in the past about different things growing up, things we experience, and how kids today are they're clueless. I mean, they're
all
clueless.
kids are clueless. I mean, we were clueless too back in the day. I think America's changing, and that's opened up all kinds of interesting things that we might be discussing today.
But it's not changing for the positive, in my opinion. I mean, do you think so?
Parents have changed, that's for sure.
Because they're stupid.
The whole world has changed. You know, I mean, the way we get information has changed.
We're
These kids think they know it all because they always think they know it all.
Well,
but now they got smartphones, so that's changed things. You know what I'm saying?
We thought we knew it all too, but I think that we had some building blocks to go off of that's been a little bit different than what kids nowadays. I don't think kids nowadays are taught. They're just not. They're not being taught about positive relationships and different social dynamics, and I mean even learning skills. I mean learning skills have gone, right through the floor.
All of that is in some ways true, and in some ways not. Depends on the family. You know what the family dynamic is, how the family over time has worked with each other.
Okay, well let me give you an example. Okay,
please do.
There's a movie, and this is what makes me think along these lines. I mean there is. I think that. I think we've created, somewhat of a nanny state, and people have talked about that, how it's gotten huge. They talk about the president and Obama and how he's contributed to that. But I think people kind of are missing the boat in terms of how it all got started. There was a movie called The Patriot with Mel Gibson.
Yep.
You guys seen that?
I have not.
Okay.
It's a great movie.
Excellent movie. It's basically set in the days when the British, when America was being founded. We were fighting the British. Young boys in that movie were expected to behave in a manner that if we requested that of them today, it would end up on the evening news as an example of what child abuse is. Okay? So what happens in the movie, early in the movie, is Mel Gibson's got, I think, 5 kids. And I think even in his personal life, Mel's got quite a few kids. But in this movie, he's got 5 kids. And one of the eldest boys is taken by the British Army to become a soldier. They come onto his property. They steal the boy. And it shows them leaving with, just this brigade of soldiers, and the boy kind of following behind a wagon, tied up to this wagon. So Mel Gibson runs upstairs. He gets his tomahawk and his muskets, and he gets his rifles, and he runs down, and he has 2 younger boys. And I mean, these boys, like 5 and 7. I mean, they're young age. And he hands them rifles, and he's like, okay, you remember how I showed you how to load these? Like, yeah. And you remember how I showed you how to shoot? Yeah. Okay, come with me. And he runs up into the woods, and he runs ahead of the army as it's walking down the trail. And he sets his boys up, kind of, 50 yards apart type of deal. And he says, don't shoot until I've done my first shot. And then after done your first shot, he says, I just want you to make 1 shot, and after that, just reload. So he sets these boys up. Army comes through. He starts nailing people. The boys pick up their muskets. They fire, and then they start reloading. And he's running through, and he's grabbing rifles, and he dusts this entire, I don't even know what you call it, brigade or whatever.
Yeah.
He dusts them all, saves the kid, and standing there, he's just a bloody mess of 20 soldiers or something like that. And the boys are just, in awe because they've never seen their father behave this way. I mean, they've never seen him go to that level. And but he saved his kid. And I mean, and later on, he ends up, joining the American Army or whatever, and they end up defeating the British, and so the story goes. But I remember watching that beginning of that movie, and I remember reading some of the articles about that movie, and some of the things that people were saying. They're just like, oh my gosh, these poor children and what they viewed, and the violence and all this stuff. And I'm thinking, you know what, kids years ago, they were taught to hunt and fish and kill and skin their own animals so they could eat and all these things. And I'm thinking nowadays, seriously, you have parents that, just from my own experience with my own kids, I've had parents question me on whether or not my son was old enough at 5 years old to carry around a pocket knife.
Well, back then it was survival.
Sure.
And if you wanted to eat, you had to go shoot whatever it was and
Sure.
skin whatever it was and eat it.
Sure.
And today we have food stamps.
Grocery stores.
And everything's frozen and you just grab it and put it in the microwave and you're done. So, some of the stress you go through in life colors your experiences. And here we are now. I mean, we're losing our greatest generation. There's 1,000 folks a day passing away that were in World War II. They went and did their jobs. It was a big issue. People that shouldn't have even been in the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, Marines, whatever.
And they got in.
They got in. They were 16 years
Lied
old. I
about
want to
their
help
age,
save the
yep.
world. I want to keep out communism. We're going to do all these wonderful things. They went and did their thing, came home, went back to the farm. Maybe they didn't talk very much to the kids. That's the story I keep hearing. Maybe they were having that post-traumatic stress syndrome, but
Yeah.
it wasn't talked about.
No.
And now the whole thing is completely different. Our folks coming back from the different Gulf Wars are having all kinds of issues. I mean, everything has changed, and the way we deal with it has changed.
And I hear you, but I mean, my thing is I'm not suggesting that we take kids as young as 5 and hand them a musket, or what's the new rifle that they're talking about for the AR-15 or whatever it is. I'm not
Rapid
talking
fire.
We're not talking about sitting there handing them guns and going. I'm just saying I think that we should expect more. Number one, we should recognize and realize that kids aren't stupid.
Nope.
They're not.
They're really smart.
They're incredibly smart.
They pick up fast.
They really do.
Things you don't want them to pick up, they pick
And
up
they are
fast.
100% capable of more
Yes.
than what we ask of them. We do not. I think parents as a whole make the biggest mistake of, in a way, especially nowadays, kind of over-parenting. We tend to do a little bit too much for them. And I think that we need to require more of our kids and expect more of our kids when it comes to the things that...
That's family per family, though, because you've got some folks that are sandwiched between trying to take care of their own parents plus the kids, so something falls out of the loop. Our world is different than it was even 5 years ago or even 10 years ago. I don't know how fast we are able to catch up with that and make allowances for that.
But can
And
you
as
say
adults, our own upbringing really does have a lot to do with how we parent.
Yes.
I mean, and I'll give you an example. Both my parents had full-blown alcoholic fathers, all right? So as a result, and they were very abusive. So as a result, my parents were absolutely awesome. They never were heavy-handed on us. They had the voice of authority, which worked very well. But I think it created more responsibility in them to be great parents.
My father's side of the family was also alcoholics. Dad didn't believe he could be a good parent because he'd never been parented.
Right.
So he kind of had a tendency to leave us alone. But he also believed in corporal punishment. So if we did something wrong and they considered it really wrong, the belt came out. Right. These days, that's child abuse.
Yeah.
Back
My dad never
then-
needed to do that. My dad would come in, we're messing up in the bedroom. My dad would come in, snap the belt. That's all there was to it.
Well, I wish we'd had that warning, but
Yeah.
Oh, I got
usually
the
we
belt,
knew.
bro.
We
I
knew.
got the belt, bro.
Well, and
Listen,
I hear that a
actually-
lot.
I
I hear-
actually had to go cut switches.
Yeah,
I mean, I
my
grew up-
roommate
my
told me
dad,
the same thing.
My dad, handed me a pocket knife and said, "You go out and you cut a switch." And I got whipped with a switch a couple times.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, that stings.
Yeah. I was pretty fortunate.
Opposite side of it, I have an uncle who's only 9 months younger than my father. They didn't believe in corporal punishment at all, probably because of what they'd experienced. Children,
Right.
They would sit and get at the eye level of the child and explain to them why they had done something wrong and what they should do instead. And there was never a slap. There was never a spanking. And I thought, oh, I can't believe she's getting away with that. Those kids were great. I babysat all kinds of children. They were my favorites. And part of it was because they were my cousins. But part of it I was absolutely amazed. They would stand nose to nose and yell at each other. And this is like 7 and 5. But never slap each other, kick each other, any of the things you saw on playgrounds when I was young.
No,
if you had a problem, you worked it out. Let's
you
go
paid
fight.
a price for that. Yeah, you paid a price. So my question is, okay, so your parents your parents weren't alcoholics, but their parents were. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, and so, and your parents were alcoholics, or
My grandfather on my
grandfather?
dad's
Right.
side
Okay,
was
so
not.
My question is, my dad was handicapped. I mean, the man who raised me wasn't physically capable of doing much, So that made me kind of I was forced to be more independent. I was forced to do things more for myself. I was forced to, kind of think on my own type of thing, because it was one of those circumstances where, it wasn't like my dad wasn't willing. I mean, he just was incapable. So I mean, I'm wondering if those type of, if that experience for you guys actually allowed you to mature a little bit more at a younger age than some of the kids are learning. Some of the kids right now, I think, are not. They're not maturing to the level they should at the age
Not
they're
being
at.
challenged
No,
is
and
what you're saying.
Yeah, and it takes them. It takes them until 23, 24, school of hard knocks from life before they figure out that, gee, I guess everybody isn't just going to cater to my whims and needs, and I got to do stuff on my own.
I got a question for you, Jacob. So you had to cut switches,
Yeah,
and you got beat.
sure.
All right.
Yeah.
Now, has that changed your consciousness in the way that you raise your children? I mean, do you expect the same thing? I mean, do you punish them in the same way?
My son and daughter have never had to cut a switch. No.
Okay.
And I've never used a belt on them. I don't. I haven't physically, done anything like that in terms.
And
of
do you
that.
think that was because of your own upbringing that you thought, okay, that's too harsh, so I'm going to find a different
No,
way
I
of going
just
about it?
it was never necessary. I mean, I am somewhat blessed with a type A, very strong personality. So, and I should say it's a blessing and a curse. I mean, because some things that I say, when I say it, are come across pretty hard and pretty pointed, and because of that, I can avoid, a lot of physical type circumstances and situations.
Right. I think that's the way my
recently
dad
I've
was.
learned
He
that,
was just, his
recently
words.
I've learned that when I do that type of voice or look or behavior in a manner that's not conducive to a positive result, things don't tend to work out for me. So I mean, that's something that I've learned recently, that I have to be a little bit more careful in regards to that, because how I perceive something isn't really how it's come across.
Okay, so how do you go about dealing out consequences when one of the kids is messing up?
Like I said, I mean, it's. I would say the most I've had to do on a physical level would be with the kids. At a young age, I would say, "Give me your hand," and they would put their hand in my hand, and I would just start to squeeze. And about the time that they saw, they felt that, okay, this is not feeling good, I'd say, "Had enough," and they would say, "Yeah," and I'd say, "Okay, then knock it off," and that would be it. So they learned at an early age that you're not physically going to do anything to your dad. That's
Okay, but
gonna
in
prevent him
that
from-
regard, do they also think, well, I can get away with more because I know I'm not going to get spanked?
I would love to have my son on the show right now because
Yeah.
because his response would nope. I
Okay.
mean, it would just be no.
So what? You take away privileges?
Actually, my thing is, I think that biblically it talks about spare the rod, spoil the child. I mean, everybody's heard that.
Right.
A lot of times people equate the rod to a physical rod where you physically beat the child. I disagree. I think the rod means withhold correction, then you spoil the child. So there is correction there. There was a time when my son was failing in his grades. He was doing very poorly in his grades, but he had one of those gaming consoles that he really, really liked, and he played on a routine basis. And I told him, I said, listen, you can fix this and bring your grades up on your own, or I can help you. And if you have me help you, you're not going to like how it turns out. Well, he didn't quite understand what that meant. Okay, so what that meant was when he got bad grades, I took his gaming console that he loved, appreciated, and enjoyed, and I busted it up right in front of him. And I said, if you want to keep your nice things, then you're going to do the work necessary to keep them. And if not, I will strip everything that you love and enjoy out of your room.
Consequences.
Yeah.
Right.
And he believed me because I actually showed him I would.
I
And the
think that's
value-
really healthy, personally.
val-
I don't know about busting it up, but definitely taking it away.
The value of whatever it was, whether it be the toy or whatever, was indifferent to me because in my mind, my son meant more. So I wanted to make a very lasting impression on him. So I took the one thing he loved most, and I destroyed it. And
there was a father that got into huge trouble not too long ago.
I saw
when
that.
the laptop was shot.
Oh, I remember seeing that
And
video.
we're talking
cheered.
huge discussions
I cheered
about
for that,
how
'cause I
unfair
thought
that
it
was
was
and how
great.
violent that was, and you know.
That was
There was
fun.
another time where my son had when he was younger, he was in school and he had taken. I can't remember what he used. I can't remember if he carved it or he just drew it with a permanent marker. But I think he carved something into one of the school benches, school chairs.
Oh, okay.
And the teacher saw him, and he was like, "Okay, he did this thing." And that wasn't the bad thing. The bad part was he tried to lie about it, and that wasn't okay. So, not for me. And it's like, you know what? You make a mistake, something. It's like, okay, that's fine, but you've got to have the stones to own up to it. And
They would actually forgive the bad deed if you told the truth in many
Exactly.
cases, which was nice.
so I to make it clear of who he was, who I saw him. Because I told him, I said, you're behaving in a manner that is not consistent with what I know of you or how you've been raised. You are a man of integrity and honor, and I expect you to behave that way. And this man that you're trying to be, this liar and this destructive person, this is not you. And so I'm going to remind you of who you are. And so I took some trimmers and I shaved his hair. I shaved him bald. And I took some soap and I drew a circle in the mirror in his bathroom. And I wrote, "I am a man of integrity and honor." And I said, every single morning when you get up to get ready for school, and I want you to look in the mirror, and I want you to repeat what's been written there. "I am a man of integrity and honor." And I said, I want you to do that until your hair is grown back.
Nice. That was a
And
long time.
for months that stayed on the mirror. His hair finally grew back. And I said, "Who are you?" And he repeated it verbatim. He knew exactly who he was. And don't ever act outside that again, because that's not you. And so that was one of the things I did.
I like it.
Unique,
Yeah.
not violent.
I'm sure a
Got
lot
the
of
point across.
Yep.
Never forget it.
No, you got to make a lasting impression, I think.
I think so.
So
Conscience is very important. I'm not sure how my mother got that across, but having a conscience, there was a number of things that I would never even think about because my conscience would say, "You're not supposed to do that. Don't do that." Maybe it's from Jiminy Cricket, the little cricket on your telling you what you're
conscience is
supposed
your
to
guide.
do. Yeah.
Right. Yep.
But
Well, empathy,
and a work ethic.
empathy is another big thing. I mean, for kids to instill a little bit of empathy towards each other and other people. I mean, you wonder why some of these kids go in and they have these mass school shootings. They absolutely have no concept of how their actions or the things that they do affect or involve other people.
Right.
They literally just go through life with kind of a selfish, self-centered mentality.
Yeah.
Kids in general, I think, are a little bit self-centered.
I
Don't
think-
you think? I mean, up until
Sure.
about 20, I mean, my brother and I had really long conversation about how abused we were and how bad our parents were. And it wasn't until we got around other people and heard what other stories existed, because you're in your own little world,
Sure.
You're only as big as your friends in your group of school. Well, that's changed, again, for today's kids, because they can see what things are posted in globally. Depending on the language, it could be anywhere because of Facebook, because of the internet. A lot of that stuff could be in another language, and it's switched over to English so they can read that too. So they have a lot more input to things than we ever did. But what was shocking was over time, I mean, I'm going to be 49 this year. My parents every year keep moving up the pedestal. I mean, they potentially could be the greatest parents ever. And it's all because of my perception and hearing other people's stories over time.
Yeah.
And realizing that those things weren't there to hurt me. They'd stop me from doing whatever it was I wanted to do, which was what made me angry. But as it turned out, their thought, because they had more experience, was better. And now that I'm older, I see that.
Yeah, and they actually show that they loved you with their actions, not just with their words.
Boundaries are important.
Yeah.
You can't always have yes, yes, yes. It
I-
has to be no occasionally,
I
so
think-
you know where the stop is. You can't go past that spot.
I think that parents that do that, that treat their kids in that manner, like I said, they really do show that they love and care. And the ones that don't, I think that they're more kind of self-centered. They're more concerned about how their kids feel about them. They want to be the good mom, the good dad, the good parent, that they're afraid to upset their kids. So
Right.
they withhold the correction that's needed.
Well, and those are the kids that continue to up the ante, doing something a little more intense each
Right.
time, hoping that somewhere they'll get that stop. And if it doesn't come, hey, I can do whatever I want. Come
you're
along.
Saying you're saying kids need that.
I think boundaries are really important. Everything in life has stops. You can't do this because of that. You do it, then there's huge consequences. Some of them you didn't even think of.
So what do you think about the liberal concept out there, the idea out there that says, let kids make their own decisions at an early age, so they learn how to, think their way through different circumstances and situations? What about that? What about people who
It's a great
say,
concept.
What about people who say you shouldn't impose your belief system on your kids or your moral codes on your kids?
I have not been around a lot of those type of kids, but I believe there was an Olympic athlete, and I'm sorry I can't remember his name right now, but they basically lived off the land in the middle of nowhere in the woods, and he decided he wanted to become an athlete. I can't even remember what his sport was, and he is a very unique individual. I've never met anybody quite like that, where they were so isolated and got to do whatever they want, whenever they want. And, that has a whole nother human being that I, to tell you the truth, haven't been around a lot. But that would explain currently the little bit I do know why so many kids are in charter schools or being homeschooled, because the parents do not want them to be in a school. They want to change whatever it is that they're putting into that child.
Right.
I just don't have a lot of experience with people who haven't had any stops whatsoever. I mean, we had all kinds of, you can't do this, you can't do that.
Yeah, my personal perspective, like I said, the only reason why I bring it up is I know there's a lot of people that would argue that point. My personal perspective is it is a mistake that kids do need that basis laid out for them. They do need structure. They do need routine. I mean, no different than when a newborn baby's born. The very first thing they do is they wrap that blanket as tight as they can around them, so they still feel comfort. They still feel secure. Okay, and I think that structure and routine and correction, that is that for kids. They feel secure. It creates a confidence in them.
Maybe a good analogy would be a brand new puppy in the household.
Okay.
If you just let the dog do whatever it wants, you're going to have shit in your house.
Right.
You know?
Did you just say that on air?
I think you can say that word. There's others you can't, but
We're not allowed to say that?
manure in your house.
We're going to go to a quick break. We're going to go to a quick break, folks. After that, Lisa, she didn't drop the F-bomb.
It was an S-bomb.
It was an S-bomb. We're going to go to a quick break, and we'll be back to continue the conversation about how we raise our kids. We're back. You're listening to Jacob Larson, Lisa King, and Theron. We're on the Common Sense Show, and we're talking about how we raise our kids. I had a guy by the name of Clark Gillespie give me a link to check out prior to the show. It's an excerpt from a posting of some of what John Locke had said in regards to education. It was posted on the Fordham University website. John Locke, for people that don't know or don't remember, was considered one of our founding fathers. He's considered the father of classical liberalism. He's contributed to the republicanism and the liberal theory are reflected in the United States Declaration of Independence. So he's got some. This guy was born in 1632, died in 1704. So some of the stuff the stuff I'm about to read is fairly old. Okay,
Ancient.
It is. It is kind of ancient. One of the things he says is, the great mistake I have observed in people's breeding their children has been that this has not been taken care of enough in its due season, that the mind has not been made obedient to discipline and pliant to reason, when at first it was most tender, most easy to be bowed. They love their little ones, and it is their duty, but they often with them cherish their faults too.
Again, back then, you screw up, you die because you don't have any food because you have to go out and shoot something and skin it and eat it.
Yeah. So what he's saying is, it's like, parents aren't taking the time to recognize, and this is 1704. I mean, that's when he died. So we're talking prior to that. The parents back then were not taking the time. This guy was critical of how kids were being raised clear back then, because in his mind, people weren't taking the time to teach their kids when they were young and easy to learn things. They weren't taking the time then to teach them, and because of that, as adults, when they were no longer easy to be taught, then they were having problems. And
Some things don't change.
I was going to say, it's kind of like the same stuff we're talking about now.
Right. History repeating.
Yeah.
Well,
So-
they're little sponges up until 6, 7.
Oh, they absorb
They
everything.
just-
And
And you don't even know what's in there until it starts, they start talking, and you're like, oh, did I say that? It's because it's coming back at me, and I didn't mean to say that.
Right.
do you know, I mean, another thing, I mentioned earlier, I said that, kids are not stupid.
Nope.
They're very smart. They pick up on a lot. One of my biggest beefs that I have with parents is talking to their kids like children. Okay, now don't get me wrong. When my kids were babies, I mean, sure, every parent does the goo goo gaga, blah blah stuff to their kids, and I mean, it's cute and it's fun. Okay, but if all you did was talk to your kids that way, they would never learn how to actually speak English.
True.
At some point in time, you have to change how you say things to them, and you have to, when they say something, make sure to say it proper so they can understand the pronunciation and say it the same
And
way.
define it to them.
My point is this. When talking to them, when they ask questions, why is the sky blue? Or where do babies come from? Questions like that. I really don't think we should dumb down the answers for them. Does that mean, you're going to have people out there that go, well, they're not going to understand why the sky is blue if you talk about the scientific explanation of why the sky is blue. And they may not at that age.
I don't
But
even know
doesn't
that
mean
one.
that doesn't mean you should give them a different answer. I think that the answer should be exactly the reason why the sky is blue. I think that the answer when it comes to where do babies come from should actually be the real answer, just with less detail.
When I was 12, babysitting these two kids who would sit nose to nose and not hit each other because they had been taught, not to hit each other and never been hit, asked the question, the 5-year-old, where do babies come from? Her mother ordered a book that went into all the parts and pieces and how they work. And so one day when I'm babysitting, having no idea that this had even occurred,
Nice.
The postman had a package, and so he rang the doorbell, and I come running to the door, and the 5-year-old got there first. And so she looked at him and just immediately started telling him all this new information that I didn't know she even had. And he's looking at me like I did it, and I'm like, I have no idea what to tell you. And so, of course, read, signed for the package, shut the door, just looked at her, changed the subject, went on to something else. Later on, talked to the parents about, she asked the question. So we ordered the book, and she told her the parts and the pieces and how they all work. And I was like, at 5? I don't think we'd even had it in health at that point in time.
My
It depends on the parent. Each
Sure.
parent, each family,
Sure.
how they handle the situation. They do it on their own. Who
Listen,
knows?
I'm not saying, all 5-year-olds should learn about sex. That's not what I'm arguing. My point is really simple. I just use it as an example. My point is this. I think when you talk to your kids, you should talk to them like an adult. And in time, they will learn to understand and comprehend adult language and speak and concepts at a much earlier age.
Yes.
And that will be something that will be a benefit to them in the future when they're dealing with other real life situations. I think the role of the parent is to teach and instruct their kids. I think that is their number one job. And parents that don't do that typically suffer consequences of that. They have kids that don't respect them and do bad things when they get older.
I think some of that's true. I think also there's the case.
Some of it?
I think it could go either way. You never know how their kids are going to grow up. You could be diligent in teaching them all the things that you think you should teach them, and they just go sideways on you. Or the other way is around, where they've had no information from mom and dad, and yet somehow by talking to the world, they get the right thing and go the right path.
Well, it's funny you mention that because John Locke
Yes, what did he say?
has more to say
Oh, please tell us.
on that subject. And once again, prior to, 1704? Was that the date? Yeah.
He died in 1704. So this is 1600.
He died in 1704, so it was prior to
15th
this.
century
okay?
information.
On the other side, he goes on to say, if the mind be curbed and humbled too much in children, if their spirits be abased and broken much, by too strict a hand over them, they lose all their vigor and industry, and are in a worse state than the former. To avoid the danger that is on either hand, meaning less instruction or too much correction, is the great art, and he that has found a way how to keep a child's spirit easy, active, and free, and yet at the same time to restrain him from many things he has mind to, and to draw him to things that are uneasy to him, he, I say, that knows how to reconcile these seeming contradictions has, in my opinion, got the true secret of education.
And these
So
are
there is a
issues
balance.
these are issues for parents. These are issues for teachers. These are issues for relationships.
There is a balance.
Yes.
I mean, obviously, too strict, too hard on a kid, you're going to crush their spirit.
Or you're going to have a very rebelling kid behind your back.
Yeah,
Yeah.
will eventually be in front of your face and everybody else around
I
them.
think being involved is really important.
What does that
I mean,
mean?
Our
What does that mean?
in our family, we sat down and had dinner every night, and
Okay.
the questions came: what did you learn in school? What happened today? Tell me about your life. And after a while, you just told her whatever you needed to know, about what had happened that day. And it was, since it started from the time we were tiny, it wasn't an issue when you got to be in high school and things got a little more difficult. We told her what they asked, what the answers were. They were involved in our lives. They knew who our friends were. We couldn't pull the old, I'm going over to stay in, Leslie's house, and really I'm over at Jason's house. We couldn't do that because she would actually call
Yeah.
to make sure you were there,
Yeah.
know what you were doing, who was the adult in charge.
So your mom and dad didn't trust you?
They did due diligence to make sure
That's
that what
what
we
they-
said was true. And
that's what
after
she
a
was
while,
saying.
we didn't even try to lie.
She was saying she didn't trust you, so she checked up on you. That's what she was saying. Even if
I
you
wouldn't think it's
she
a
didn't take
matter
your
of
word for it.
trust. It's just it's parental duty.
It was parental duty.
Yeah.
It was her job to take care of the kids, so I need to know where my kids are and if they're telling me what
I'm
they're really
totally
doing.
playing the devil's advocate.
Yeah.
I know you are. But it's so funny because just 2 nights ago, there was some kind of a career day. And so they were giving the top 5 tips, or maybe 4 tips. I think there were 10 altogether, but I wrote down 4 for today's college, or actually high school graduates
Oh,
looking
geez.
for careers, what to do and what not to do in an interview. And I was just blown away by the list. Number 1, don't text or answer your phone during the interview.
Duh.
Now, you and I all know that when we're older.
Really?
And if you've spent your entire life on a smartphone and you're, everything that happened, there's now addictions to cell phones.
But
you
they
guys know
actually
that, right?
they actually had that as a list.
That was number 1. Number 2, dress to impress. In other words, no cutoffs and thongs. You're supposed to have
Take a shower.
an
your teeth.
appearance that would say, gee, we want to hire you.
Yeah.
Number 3 was do not chew gum. Now, that was another one. We weren't allowed to chew gum in school at all. So why would you chew gum in an interview? And number 4 was don't talk badly about your previous employer
Exactly.
because that reflects badly on you.
Yeah.
And I was kind of surprised
It's the same thing with
that
the
they had to
relationships.
take these. They even had to list these.
No, I
But
think
I'm
that
not
last one
17.
actually does make sense. But yeah.
Listen, okay, the bottom line is, okay, up until the last one, I think it's all basic common sense. The last one, I think people tend to do that a lot, and they do it with more than just
Sure they
employers.
do.
They do that in relationships too.
Yeah.
And I think regardless of that, it never goes the way you want it to. It turns out negative when that
Have
takes
either
place.
of you been at a restaurant lately?
Sure.
Sure, yeah.
Have you noticed how many people are not talking? They're all on their phones. I mean, every one of them.
Oh yeah.
Everybody at the table.
Okay, I'm guilty of that, Lisa. I do that myself.
It's
so.
like you go to get together to have a nice meal, whether it's breakfast, lunch, cup of coffee, dinner, and nobody's talking. They're all texting.
It is something that I got to admit. I mean, I've sat at the table. I've had 2 or 3 friends, and I look down and we're all using our phones. So I mean, it is something that typically it's brief. It's just a quick check. We put them away, but it is something that I've been more conscious of lately, and I have tried to actually put
So
it
what
away.
I'm
But
saying
I see what
is,
you're saying.
America is changing. A lot of things that were 10 years ago are not today. The world has changed, and maybe us being a little bit older haven't really keyed
Go
in.
to your room.
Well, that's another one. Texting from upstairs,
Yeah.
downstairs,
Right, right.
or upstairs, downstairs. You need to go to bed, or gosh, can I get a bowl of popcorn? I'm hungry while I'm doing my homework.
Guilty of that. I've done that. I've totally done that.
That's funny.
Come out here. I want to talk to you. I mean, absolutely. I mean, I am guilty of it.
And text speak, it's really difficult to spell if you're using the shortcuts all the time.
Right.
That's
And
what really
sometimes
gets
I
me.
can't read it.
Like when I go online and I see all these grammatical errors, I guess I'm somewhat of a grammatical Nazi. I just you got to be able
hate
to
guys like
spell. you know.
hate
And
things like
I don't know. I see all the acronyms or whatever, and it just frustrates me to no end.
Yeah, but see, the kids these days,
I want
they just hit
content.
spell check.
Okay, I don't
Just
care how the
spell check.
spelling is. I want content. That's my concern. Content is what concerns
Kids have
me.
spell check. Why should I learn how to spell? Why should I be cursive? I remember
They don't
I've
write
always
cursive
printed.
anymore. They have eliminated it.
I've
it doesn't
always
exist.
printed, always. And so when it got to the point where I had a checking account, I had to actually practice my signature because I printed everything.
Right. That's
and
why
they
I am.
expected a cursive.
I probably couldn't write cursive anymore.
It's not.
Yeah,
in schools
you guys
anymore.
were before the show. It's not taught in schools anymore?
Nope.
That really surprised me.
Why?
That stuff, I don't think. I mean, personally, for me, guys. I mean, yeah. I mean, that's one thing. Or the I don't think that's necessarily as big a deal as basic things, like I said, in terms of teaching kids to actually take care of, do things for themselves at a really young age. I think that is the biggest mistake. Is as they become adults, then you find the adults that basically, I mean, they're going from job to job. They're on unemployment. They're on welfare. I mean, they don't know what to do. They don't know how to take care of, a checkbook or.
I would almost think that their relationships are more of an issue than spelling, cursive, that kind of thing.
Exactly. The social dynamic of what they're being taught changes, big time.
Some of the stories that have been in the media recently are serious cases of bullying. Some of them are your typical, if you have blue eyes and I have green eyes, I'm going to pick on the blue-eyed person because yours are different than mine. Mm-hmm. Or you wore a funny shirt today. Or those tennis shoes aren't the latest tennis shoes and I've got the latest tennis shoes, so therefore there's something wrong with you.
Right.
I mean, there's a certain amount of that no matter what it is, it's going to be something stupid. I don't know that's bullying. But in today's world, if you pick on that kid because his shirt is green,
people get
that's bullying,
they freak out over it.
which screws up relationships and communications later.
Right.
Yeah, because we're taught to, curl up in a ball in the fetal position when somebody calls us a name. It's like you never learn
to
to.
a third school, please, because that kid looked at me wrong.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I mean, it's just a joke. Absolute joke.
But some of them are serious, where youngsters have been attacked and hurt badly.
Yeah.
So where do you find the
on
line?
On a physical aspect, I mean, yeah. I mean, that's once again teaching kids empathy. What your words and your actions are doing to the people around you, whether or not that's something that is a positive, productive thing. I mean, that's a big deal. But like I said, kids typically lack that. I mean, nowadays they seem to lack it. I mean, they just don't understand the concept. I mean, thinking of the simple concept of sharing, teaching them to share, or if there's only so much food and somebody is going without eating, maybe you should give them some of your food, type of thing. I mean, I think that those things need to be instilled at them on a younger age, and I think that the reason why kids that are older struggle with those things, and they fall into the traps of, either being bullied or becoming a bully, is because, if parents coddle to them at a young age, it all becomes about them. And they don't think about anybody else. I mean, other people's concerns and needs, don't even fall into the equation because, if they need something, if they want something, that's the big deal. And they will throw a fit, at a really young age or at an adult age, no different than if they were young. It's just a different type of throwing a fit.
I think there's a statistic out there that over 50% of people that are younger than 24 have been broken up with somebody over their phone. No screaming, no yelling, no what did you do wrong or what
They
did I
send
do
a
wrong.
text.
We're no longer together. Click. Send. So if you think about that and magnify that over issues, little issues, somebody cuts you off on the road. Your employer says, hey, I don't like the way you're doing that. All of that stuff is magnified because it's words and emotion as opposed to a text.
Right.
So are you making the argument, and just to clarify here, are you making the argument that
I was going to say
technology is a bad thing?
No, I'm just saying that technology does wonderful things, but there's a number of things that we'll lose in it. And one of them is relationships and the way we deal with each other.
Okay,
Yeah.
but
it's important to communicate.
Okay,
it's important
but-
to let your words come through. You can say something innocent in a text, but because there's no tone,
Right.
they read
Totally
into
taken
it
wrong,
and,
absolutely.
and think you're mad at them.
Yes.
I get it. Yep.
Yeah.
And not just capital letters. My mom has that problem. She
I've-
just hits caps,
Yep.
and it's capital letters. And I know she's not yelling. She just didn't pay any attention.
Right.
People that have grandparents who do that. Oh, yeah, grandma's not.
I've
paying
gotten in
attention.
more than one argument over a text.
Yes.
I mean, absolutely.
Yes.
Because it was not relayed correctly or not. Yeah,
I have
absolutely.
taken emails and read them how I thought one person thought it came across because they figured they were yelling, and then read the same email the way I thought the other person meant it, which was sweet and innocent and no, malintent intended.
I've cut back on my use of exclamation points, to be totally honest. I mean, I really have. I mean, there was a while it's like every sentence ended with an exclamation point because I was excited about something, but it's like now I don't use as many exclamation points because I think
I'll capitalize one word.
and sometimes I'll do that too. One word,
Right.
but not
Great.
the entire
Have a
sentence.
great day.
Yeah, great. Okay. So yeah, I'm with you on that. I think
Everything is good and bad.
okay, but let's take Facebook for instance. Okay,
Everything's good and bad.
You know me. I mean, I'm very active on Facebook, and I've had people that have talked negatively about Facebook, and they say, "Oh, it's just such a disconnect." Blah blah blah.
I heard that show.
You know what? I mean, the bottom line is, okay, nobody wants to admit this. Okay, everybody likes to dismiss Facebook, and they say, "Oh, it's so trivial, and it's not a big deal." And
It
it's
drives
not,
me
You know
mad.
what?
I can't stand it anymore.
It is a very large, small thing. I mean, I try to explain to people, Facebook is the equivalent of walking into a party or a bar or social setting where you have all your friends there and you're all standing around talking about different things and you're interacting with each other and stuff like that. So the fact that it's online and it's just a couple clicks and nobody can physically see you may seem very small and may seem very distant, but the big scheme of things is that it's actually really a big deal. It's a big social event. It's a big social gathering going on, and because of that, you should take it seriously.
And the problems come when they don't take it seriously.
Exactly. When people don't take it seriously, when people don't, consider exactly what's taking place on that darn thing, arguments take place. And it turns into a big deal.
Yeah, and for me, I feel like I need to. I've just had this disconnect with Facebook over the last year and a half or so. For one, it's information overload, and number two, people are always posting their personal issues and political issues, and it's like, really,
But
is
why
that
are
what
they
you're all
doing
about?
that, Darren? I mean, they're doing that because, once again, it is a social outlet. You're communicating with other
Right.
people
But
on
also-
a level that you've been incapable of doing years ago.
And I also feel like, when
is a
you're acting,
juggernaut.
you are obligated to like everything that somebody says, and if you don't, well, that person just doesn't like me.
Well, there you go, Darren, right there. Something as simple as a like can cause you an argument.
right.
You
Right, so
understand what I'm
that's why I
saying?
choose to disconnect from it.
My point is this, okay? Does it make any sense to belittle or dismiss something as simple as a like?
I don't see why it's such a big deal, but some people really get
Okay.
worked up over it.
Because it is a big deal. Because if you were standing in person in front of that person, and you didn't acknowledge something that they thought was funny or something that they appreciate, you would basically snub them in person. That's
Okay,
what you're doing
but I've
online.
got 300 and some friends on my Facebook. I don't have time. I have jobs. I have responsibilities to do. I can't go around liking everything.
No, of course not. But people who know you, that are your actual true friends, would know that about you.
And I'm not going to scroll through the whole news feed from the last time I checked it.
Once again, okay, people that know you, that are friends with you, they know you're busy, they know you're working. There's going to be a concession. Point is this: when you don't do something that they know you're capable, able, willing, and expect you to do, that's when you get in trouble, bro.
That's true. Seems like I'm always getting in trouble.
And a lot of times, what you don't know, I just found out recently by checking 2 days ago that when you X things out, because I had a lot of different causes that kept popping up on my page, and I thought, I don't want this to be a cause thing back and
Right.
forth, and since I'm not replying at all, I'm just going to take it off there. I didn't realize that
Same
I
with
could
the
have
games.
potentially have been cutting that person off from posting anything.
Right.
I just found that out. I
Right.
had no idea.
You're what?
When you
can hide-
X
you hide
something
somebody.
off,
Yeah.
you're saying I want this off my page. So
Yes.
there's an X that pops up.
It'll hide the
and
entire person.
it will entirely disappear. Well,
Right.
this particular
post.
person had posted, every
Oh,
cause
what-
there was out there. Yes, I'm for whales, but I don't want it on my Facebook page.
So you
so
eliminate
I X'd
them.
all off, and I just found out from another person who had been cut off of Facebook, could post nothing. That apparently someone had X'd, and when you hit so many of
Now,
them,
see, I didn't
the
know
page
that.
automatically said, okay, you can't post anything right now.
I had
so
no
I probably
idea.
ticked somebody off without even knowing I was.
And you may have, and I do that. I do that all the time. The point is, and I think that like you said, I mean, there are some things technology-wise that definitely are not necessarily the greatest thing when it comes to social dynamics, but I think that there are other things that are, Facebook being one of them. I think that it does. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I've come across people that I haven't talked to in years, and for the first time, and I don't know how long, I've been able to actually experience and see things that are going on in their life, and they've been able to see and experience things going on in mine. It is not something that is so trivial that should simply be dismissed. I think it's a mistake. The moment you start doing that on a social thing of, such as Facebook, the magnitude of Facebook, that's when you're going to get yourself in trouble. I mean, you need to be conscious of the people that you're with on there. And this is talking from someone who makes it his personal goal in life to step on people's toes. I mean, seriously, I mean, it is a big deal. So
every generation has things that are difficult to deal with, and we've got a whole new set of them thanks
Right.
to the internet and smartphones.
Okay, we've
Yay!
got 7 minutes left of the show, roughly. I'd like to do the Tarbosh segment of the show. I know that we can go back and talk about some of this stuff, but I haven't done the Tarbosh segment of the show for the last couple of shows because we've had other stuff going on. But I think this is a good one. Tarbosh segment of the show: be wary of friends and family when discussing your dreams. Friends and family can be dream killers. They may not know that they're killing dreams. They may not be doing it maliciously or deliberately, but they can kill your dreams and not even know it. They will inject fears, doubt, worry, and they will offer you reasons why things won't work. They'll bring up their own past failings, etc., all with the thought of protecting you or helping you in mind. And yet, I'm telling you, when you are starting something out or trying to pursue a dream, the last thing you need is negativity. You need to surround yourself with positive people. I'm not suggesting you look for people to blow smoke up your backside, but you find positive people who are supportive of you regardless of what you choose to pursue, who believe in your success without question. Those are the people you want to keep in your corner and look to for advice and support. The others, although they be a good friend or a good family member, may not be the best person to hang around or take advice from in that regard. So if you find that to be true, limit or end your exposure to them. You cannot afford to let vampires drain you of the essential emotional ingredients needed in which to better your life. You just can't. So remember that and take note. And that is the Tarbosh segment of the show.
Amen.
What do you think of that?
I love it.
Yeah.
People are drawn to positive people.
Right.
If you are supportive and positive and always try to see the sunny side, I think your life
And I
might
think
be
there
a
are
tiny
people
bit
that
better.
always want to have your best interest in mind, but they're wanting you to live your life according to their terms. Well, this is what worked for me, so this is what should work for you. So therefore, you shouldn't take on this endeavor because you could fail. Take the straight and narrow.
Well, and if it's coming from your parents, they have your best interests in mind.
Right.
They're not trying to necessarily kill your dreams.
Sometimes.
But they may not be the perfect person to say, "Hey, I'm thinking about this for a new job."
Sometimes your parents have your best interest in mind. There are some parents. Listen, I know people.
You would hope they would.
I know people whose parents are an absolute nightmare. I mean, they're just a train wreck. And how these people have become the people they are, I got no clue. Because you look at their parents and they're like, oh my gosh, they are the most jealous, manipulative, malicious people on the planet. Mm-hmm. And they do everything they can to script their own kids. I mean, they attack their own children.
And I swear they're worse when they're 80 and they're stuck in a wheelchair and they have nothing but their mouth left to play with. I mean, it's just unbelievable negativity.
Yeah, I hope I never become that jaded person. I see that all the time, and I always remain conscious of that. I hope I become that jaded as I get older. I hope I'm still able to have some positivity about me.
I think the relationship when it comes to kids and parents, obviously changes over time. It starts out where you have to instruct, you have to teach, you have to guide them. At that point, you're really not their friend, and you shouldn't have that expectation of being their friend. Parents that do that, I think, make a mistake. As things progress in the relationship, as the kids grow up and they get older, they mature, they start becoming adults of their own, then I think it does turn into type of a friendship and more of a equal respect type of deal.
Mm. And so you're also saying that I should go and be liking everything on Facebook that my friends post now.
No, I'm not there. And I what I'm saying is if you expect people to take an active interest role in your life, you need to do that with them.
Mm-hmm.
And
I understand
one of
that.
those things involves, Facebook.
If you want to be a friend, if you want to have a friend, be a friend. I get that.
Yeah, I'm just saying you shouldn't dismiss it because it's a mistake. It's one of those things that'll bite you in the backside.
Yeah.
I recently was at the mall and met a fantastic 16-year-old that was selling almonds with bacon and garlic, which doesn't necessarily sound great until you put it in your mouth.
Doesn't
It's
sound bad to me.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Found out he was 16, and I said, I want to know what happens to you in 3 or 4 years. I mean, if you are this put together and this composed with people walking up and down the mall to sell almonds, I want to see what happens to you next. I would love to mentor you.
Yeah.
I would love to give you positive, whatever reinforcements you need. Because if you can do this at 16, you are going to be amazing at 20.
Yeah.
And then who knows what will happen next? I mean, if you are positive and give people encouragement, anything can happen. The impossible could be possible.
I think more people need to be along those lines. I mean, think about all the news, the way it's presented nowadays. It's thrown out there so negative that you've got people that are literally afraid of everything.
Jacob, guess what I told him?
I mean, they're afraid of everything.
I said, read. You need to read. The average CEO reads 4 to 5 books a month.
Yeah.
So get out there and read everything you can read, and anything that piques your passion at all, check into it. Find somebody who's already
absorb it.
doing it to see if that fits you at all. Because what you end up doing could be a smattering of all the information you put together that ends up being the next new product, the next new thing. That
Model
iPod.
after your heroes.
You just never know. I
You
mean,
never
that's the
know.
beauty behind things. I mean, you just never know.
You
So, I
can
mean,
do anything. The only thing that can stop you is you thinking you can't.
I literally, when I wrote my very first book, I mean, literally, my first book, I simply threw it together and threw it out there because I just wanted to find out the process. And one of the very first things somebody had asked me is one of my family members like, "So, are you rich yet?" I'm like, the damn thing has shit. What are you talking about? But everything he could to be negative about it.
Sure.
Okay, folks, if you like what you've heard on today's show, please support the show. Go to www.buycommonsense.com. Click on the show link. Check out the sponsorship section of the site. Thank you, Lisa, for being on the show. I greatly appreciate it. You absolutely rock.
You're very welcome. I had a great time. Thank you.
See you next week, folks.
You've been listening to The Common Sense Show on KSCR. We'll see you next Wednesday.